Hi guys, welcome to my second lesson here. Just in case you're wondering, this is a digital background. This is kind of my dream house. I don't actually live here, but I thought it's a nice background. So today let's study Creed's Aventus. Again, this is not an exact formula. Please understand, it's not an exact formula. And it's very common. In fact, it's a normal thing that perfumers make GCMS analysis of many different perfumes that we can study from and learn from. Of course, a GCMS analysis, what you do is you take a little sample of a perfume, for example, in this case, maybe Creed's Aventus, and you can send it in to scientists, to a university, or to some kind of laboratory. And they will examine the perfume and give you a basic blueprint of the formula of this perfume. Now, bad people, uncreative people, people with no imagination, they will just copy these perfumes and sell them for a cheap price, which is a horrible thing to do. And so I'm going to give you a basic outline of a perfume that smells somewhat similar to Creed's Aventus. I will not share with you the exact GCMS analysis. First of all, an exact analysis is nearly impossible. Second of all, I don't think it's ethical, but this formula is close enough to sort of learn to create a fresh citrus and wood perfume. And it's a beautiful formula as it is. So let me pause the video now for a moment and get yourself a coffee, get yourself out a notebook, and welcome to my second free lesson. Today we're going to be looking at a perfume formula that is somewhat similar to Creed's Aventus. Again, not an exact copy, but something we can study and learn from. So let me pause for a moment. Okay, guys, welcome back. I'm glad you got a coffee, a tea. I'm going to make a list of the materials that you need here in the chat. You need hedione, helvetolide, timber silk, ambroxan, linole acetate, or linalool, or ethyl linalool. They're slightly different, but any one of the three should be fine. Patchouli, which is patchouli alcohol. It's a very soft, transparent, very bright patchouli, very different from the essential oil. I don't think you'll get away with using patchouli essential oil in this formula. Next, you have bergamot essential oil. Natural is always best. Linalool, okay, again, similar to linole acetate, slightly different. Lyral, which is a mujoe material. It's a lily of the valley type material. You need Lyral or Lyral or liliol. Any of them should be okay. Sweet orange, clary sage, sweet orange essential oil, clary sage essential oil, petitgrain essential oil, and you're going to need a nice fresh pineapple accord. The pineapple accord is probably best with this one. Again, this is not an exact copy. I know in the real Creed Aventus formula, they may not use hedione regular, they may use hedione high cis. In the real Creed Aventus formula, they may use a very specific, very special pineapple accord, which is kind of, I probably wouldn't even be able to know how to recreate that. Anyways, pineapple accord Everinol, which is kind of like supposed to be a substitute for oak moss, but doesn't smell like oak moss. Anyways, Everinol or Everinol, neroli, a cassis accord, not cassis absolute, very different. You need a cassis, accord, cassis, giveco, for example, is a good choice. It's sweet, it's much less powerful than cassis essential oil or cassis absolute. Then you need some vanilla, and finally a little touch of birch tar. So right away, off the bat, you see in descending order with this formula, the very most voluminous materials are hedione and helvetolide. Helvetolide is this kind of, it's a fruity musk, okay, it's a white musk. I should say hedione and helvetolide, both these materials smell like they're very clean. They are very like nearly transparent materials that everything else blends into, okay? And then below the two very transparent materials, we have timber silk, which is this diffusive, dry, yet semi-transparent cedar wood material. And the combination of hedione, helvetolide, timber silk, and I should say also the next material, ambroxan, makes this perfume very transparent, slightly woody, and very diffusive. So that's one key to a lot of modern masculine perfumes, is they often have a lot of white musks. They often have transparent, modern, single molecule materials. It's a basic concept. So now I'll show you guys, please, I'll put again the video. No, I won't put it on pause, but make sure gather these materials together and let me show you now the formula. So here is the basic formula. We've got 22% hedione, 15% helvetolide, 15% timber silk, and 11% ambroxan. Right off the bat, guys, you check the chat there, 22% hedione, helvetolide, timber silk, very diffusive. You can see hedione is this super transparent, slightly waxy. It's actually technically a jasmine material, but what hedione does to any perfume is it brings diffusion to the whole perfume. And Aventus is a very diffusive perfume, and it is very light and transparent. And it is an ambroxan perfume. You can see ambroxan here. We have in this formula 11%. That's an incredible amount of ambroxan in any perfume. Not too many other perfumes use this volume of ambroxan. This is something that Creed, they really like to work with the ambroxans. They like to work with the ambergris materials. Ambroxan is this like light, woody, diffusive material. So guys, please pause this video and smell each one of these materials. Smell each one of these materials. Smell the hedione, smell the helvetolide, smell the timber silk, and smell the ambroxan. And come back and tell me which materials are the most transparent and which materials are the least transparent. So let's pause the video right now. Okay, so welcome back. I'm glad you paused it. You were able to smell these materials. And you will see we have kind of like two sets of materials. We have two woodies, and which are the timber silk and the ambroxan. Very diffusive, dry, woody materials. Yeah, timber silk and ambroxan, they're dry, cedar-like materials. And then we have two nearly completely transparent, cool, little bit fruity, little bit floral, musky white materials, which are the hedione and the helvetolide. The hedione helvetolide accord, these two materials together. The hedione creates a floracity. It increases the floral sweetness actually to the helvetolide. They kind of work in synergy with each other. So the hedione, the helvetolide, very, very light. These are the true most transparent materials. And next, we have these timber silk and ambroxan, which together make up like 26% of the perfume formula. 15% for the timber silk, which is a very transparent cedar wood material. Very light, very dry, very diffusive. And then the ambroxan, which is somewhat similar. Now, pause the video again and try to smell the difference between hedione and helvetolide. And pause the video and smell the difference between timber silk and ambroxan. So what you should have noticed is that hedione is barely perceptible at all. Maybe once in a while, you'll get a tiny, small little scent of a little bit of waxiness, a little tiny bit of greenness, perhaps the slightest sweetness from hedione. A good way to really smell hedione is you put a little bit on your hand and smell it this way. With the white musks, with hedione as well, and with many very light materials, the best way to smell them is actually from your hand. So try that. And if you try it, now helvetolide is more easy to smell. And what you should get from helvetolide is it should smell a little bit like clean laundry, also slightly sweet, slightly waxy, and a tiny little bit of maybe a pear note. Some people suggest like a pear, something fruity, something slightly fruity there. If you haven't smelled these two materials, if they're very difficult to smell, after a couple months of studying perfumery, you will begin to smell them. Okay. And at the very least, you will certainly smell their effect on the perfume. So the hedione and the helvetolide, together, they make up something like, what is it? 37% of this entire perfume. These transparent materials allow for all the other materials to breathe and move through the perfume. All right, it gives it a lightness, a kind of transparency through the entire perfume that a lot of creeds are very famous for. So this perfume is almost built, almost in watercolors, like washes, light layers, semi-transparent layers. Certainly the most voluminous materials in this perfume are fairly light. Now, let's talk about the second set of materials. So pause the video again and smell timber silk and ambroxan and try to smell the difference, okay? So pause right now, smell timber silk, smell ambroxan, and you should see quite a difference. So what you should have noticed is that the timber silk really does smell like cedar wood. It's quite diffusive, and it does really smell, it has the same sort of texture as the cedar wood, but maybe it's only 20% strength of cedar wood essential oil. Not to get too off track, but there are a lot of materials that are semi-transparent or transparent cedar wood materials. ISO-E Super, for example, that's another example. Compared with ambroxan, ambroxan is a very interesting material because it also smells like cedar wood, but it has a salty mineral aspect to it. Ambroxan is probably more diffusive, but when you smell ambroxan right up close to really up close, it seems to disappear, but when you move back, it's really quite influential, very diffusive. Whereas the timber silk, if you move up close and you smell it close up, you can smell it much clearer there. And timber silk has this kind of resinous quality. Even if you put a little bit on your skin, it has a bit of a musky, resinous quality, where I find ambroxan to be more kind of, it has a very different, drier texture, ambroxan does. A dry granule, very fine sandpaper, very smooth, slightly sandy, dusky kind of texture to it. So we have woods in combination now, guys, with some very transparent, light, white musk type floral materials. We set the stage for an Aventus type perfume where, what is it, 22, 15, 15, 30, 50, about 60% of the perfume is this accord that's very light, a very transparent, woody, diffusive, masculine, yeah, timber, silk, and ambroxan, very masculine, semi-transparent, woody base. So let's go back and look at the formula and see what we have next. I believe next we're going to have to put in some citrus materials. So let's see. Yes, so here, guys, we have linole acetate, Patchouli. Well, not in really into the citrus materials, but yes, okay, linole acetate, linalool, ethyl linalool. All of these materials here, the linalols, ethyl linalool, linole acetate, very bright, rosewood, coriander smelling, very clean, bright woods, lifting materials. These, and they smell a bit tea-like as well. These linalols, these ethyl linole acetates, they really lift woods and help them to combine with citrus materials. That's what I find they do best. They're nearly medicinal smelling, so just take a moment, smell the linole acetate, see the brightness. Linole acetate, ethyl linalool, linalols, a lot of them are in like a lot of herbs. It's the brightness within herbs, many times in like bergamot. I believe ethyl linalool is in there, bergamot. And it's this kind of bridge. It's this bridge between coriander, the linalols, the linole acetates. They're all kind of this same family. They smell like coriander. They smell like rosemary. They smell like lavender. They smell like rosewood. They smell like so many materials. It's the brightness. Once you smell linalool, ethyl linalool, linole acetate, any of these materials, you'll never forget what they smell like. They really bring in a great opening into any perfume, and they really allow the woods to combine with the bright citrus materials, and they allow these transparent woody materials to really combine with, they're the bridge between woods and herbs and bridge and green materials and woods and other materials. So take a look at these linalool, linole acetate. Smell it, really get it in your head. And then later on, take your time to find the difference and the nuances between ethyl linalool, linole acetate. There are slight differences that you can discover for yourself. So pause the video and smell this and just imagine the brightness. Okay, guys, so the next three materials, according to their volume, is we have the linole acetate, linalols, ethyl linalols. These are brightening, nearly medicinal smelling, bright woods materials, coriander smelling materials, herbal fresh materials. We have 7.3%. Then after that, a very interesting material that's very important to this particular formula. And everybody knows what patchouli is, but not many people have heard of patchouli or patchouli alcohol, which is one of my favorite materials. So we have patchouli in there as well at 6%, and then after that, some bergamot. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about this patchouli, this patchouli alcohol. Patchouli, first of all, is a fascinating, fascinating material. There's many kinds of patchoulis. You can get from the darkest, darkest patchoulis from India. And when they're aged and they're really well made, they smell like dark chocolate. And then you can get some nice cleaner patchoulis from Indonesia, which are kind of like a warm honey smell, like it's a very rich, thick, but much lighter than the Indian patchoulis. And then a step higher, a little brighter than the Indonesian patchoulis, is we have maybe patchouli fractions, which is they take out the dirty base notes. Scientists, people who are much smarter than me, take out the dirty, the smokiest aspects of patchouli, the dirtiest aspects of patchouli, the harshest aspects of patchouli. They clean it up, and you can purchase patchouli fractions, beautiful material, much cleaner smelling, much lighter smelling than the other two patchoulis that I mentioned, more top notes. And then you can purchase, finally, the cleanest, the most top notes of all patchoulis is patchouli alcohol. And it's very bright, and it's much more transparent than the other patchoulis that I've mentioned. So patchouli alcohol, it's very fitting to this formula, because if you look at this formula so far, right, what have we covered? We've covered hedione, which is very transparent. We've covered helvetolide, which is a transparent, slightly fruity white musk. Then we covered timber silk, which is also very much transparent, but this is kind of a cedarwood smelling material. And ambroxan, which is also slightly transparent as well. And to add another depth of layer of complexity to the ambroxan, a woody material, to the timber silk, a woody material, we have something that's in the way of patchouli, a patchouli alcohol, that just adds a great earthiness, yet it's transparent. Patchouli will add a medicinal kind of Chinese medicine complexity, little bit sweet, a little bit fruity even, a little bit minty, because patchouli is actually a mint plant. The patchouli will add all these kinds of dimensions without weighing down our formula, because one of the key aspects of modern perfumes is to have this kind of transparency through the perfume, especially for men's fresh summertime fragrances. You want to balance out the complexity and density, but also keep it remaining fresh and transparent and clear for all those materials to cycle through the perfume to really make some lift, and you just don't want to weigh it down. So patchouli, it brings in that complexity of patchouli without weighing down your perfume. Okay, so we've got some white, clean, transparent materials. We have some lifting, nearly effervescent, lifting, bright materials in the way of the linoleals. We have the complexity of the patchouli alcohol that adds a dimension to this perfume without weighing it down. And then next, we have the bergamot. Now, the bergamot is a wonderful, bergamot is the most popular opening note to all perfumes. It's very classic. The great thing about bergamot is it is simultaneously fresh and bright. It is also herbaceous. It's got some complexity. It's not just fresh. It's not just mint, but it's got some sweetness as well. It's got almost a candy sweetness in there, bergamot does. It's got, bergamot has an aspect of a tea note. When bergamot dries down, it smells like, almost like tea in a way. And you'll see further down in this formula, we have clary sage, which is almost this tea note. Now try to catch this. When bergamot dries down, it dries down into a tea note. That tea note combines with the linalool or the linole acetate, which are also somewhat like these bright herbal teas. As you can imagine you have in your hand a bunch of stalks of rosemary, dried, very dry, and lavender, and all sorts of different kinds of herbs. And they're very dry. And imagine you break the stems and you smell the woody part of these herbs. You smell the woody part, and it will smell a little bit like wood, a little bit like bright herbs, a little bit like bright medicine, and a little bit like tea. And so bergamot also has that aspect. It opens up very fresh and candy-like. It dries down to tea, a little bit woody, and that also allows bergamot to combine nicely, to go through the clary sage and down into also these woods, the clary sage and the linalool and the linole acetate, and the dry down of the bergamot really bridges the gap between the citruses into the woods. Petitgrain also does this very well. Petitgrain is probably the easiest example. If you smell petitgrain essential oil, you'll smell that bridge between citrus and woody. This is kind of what I'm talking about. Anyways, so recap. What do we have in this formula? We have a lot of transparent, lifting, white musk materials, and hedione for diffusion and transparency. And then we also have some transparent woody materials, very light, also very transparent. All of these materials, the hedione, helvetolite, timber silk, ambroxan, linole acetate, and patchouli, they're all single molecules. These are all human isolated molecules, so they don't have the complexity of whole essential oils. This allows the maintenance of a transparent perfume. Okay, if you make a perfume with a bunch of different essential oils, there's a very real chance that you could end up making something very muddy. But as you can see, maybe 60% of this formula is all, probably much more, is all single molecules. This is also helps with the transparency through the perfume, helps with the lightness. This is a summer perfume after all, right? You want to maintain that lightness. So we have the citrus, we have the woods, we have the transparent woods, we have the tea type linalool materials. What do we have next? I'm just going to push them in here into the chat. So again, guys, if you check out, we have the linalool. And again, that's more tea type materials. And then we have a material in here, very interesting, Lyral. 3% of this formula is Lyral. Why? Lyral is a moujouet material. It is a cool green floral lily of the valley material. It is waxy. Lyral smells like, I mean, if you have the chance, pause the video now, smell the Lyral. It is similar to timber silk in that it's transparent, but it's on the opposite end of the temperature spectrum. The Lyral is much cooler. So what perfumers will often do is, if we're making a woody or masculine perfume and we find it to be a bit too warm through the middle, if we have a bit too much isoe super, if we have a bit too much ambroxan or timber silk, these warm woody materials, what we can do is we can add Lyral, we can add materials like well, hydroxycitronellol with an A, hydroxycitronellol type materials. We can add these materials, these cool, transparent green floral materials to balance out the warmth. Like if you smell a perfume and it's purely warm, it's very boring. If you smell a perfume and it's purely cool, it's also very boring. You want a little bit of a balance, okay? Now, no doubt, in this perfume, we have citrus materials. We have linalool. We have bergamot is cool. The linalool is a cool material. Petitgrain is basically cool. The pineapple accord. It's a juicy cool, fruity, juicy cool. So there is definitely some coolness in this perfume, especially through the opening. But what happens when that opening's gone and then you're left with something that's very, very warm and woody? Sometimes it can be boring. So put in a little bit of these Lyral, Lily of the Valley materials to balance it out, to make something a little bit more, I guess you could say sophisticated, a little bit more balanced. Okay, that is the purpose of Lyral. I believe it is a middle note. It does not last quite as, well, no, it doesn't last as long as these woods do, but it maintains the coolness and freshness much longer than if it were not included. If there was no Lyral in this perfume would very quickly go from citrus to woods much quicker than without the inclusion of Lyral. Okay. And so we have Lyral at 3%, which is not much. It's also a great diffusive material. It's quite diffusive. Then we have some sweet orange. Guys, I want to talk about sweet orange. Be careful with it. Most men's fresh perfumes, you don't, I feel, you don't want to add a lot of sweet orange to the opening of fresh men's colognes, because having too much sweetness right from the beginning of a perfume will almost stop you from inviting someone in. Let me put it this way. You want the opening of a men's or nearly almost all men's or women's, whatever. Let's say a cologne type perfume, okay? I think anybody can wear anything, really. But imagine you sprayed a perfume and right away it's very, very sweet. Well, the rest of the perfume after that better be much sweeter and much warmer, because it's very odd. If you have a perfume, it starts out sweet and then it becomes dry, something like this. So the classic opening to most perfumes is something light, something bright. It could be something very juicy, like the pineapple accord in this perfume. But it's my personal opinion, you don't want the opening of a cologne to be overly sweet. I think if you think about it for a second, it should be maybe, yeah, it should make sense. Anyways, so almost every perfume that I've ever made or studied or dissected, nobody uses, as a general rule, you don't want to use a ton of sweet orange in the opening of your perfume. It's quite a dangerous material to use. So be light with it, be light with it. Then we have some lime, okay, which is great because the lime and the sweet orange is like almost like candy, and the lime gives a nice green touch. Sweet orange and the lime together. And actually, if you look in the chat there, the cassis, it's kind of a fruity black berries. It's cassis. It's like a berry. The cassis, the lime and the sweet orange, they go wonderfully with the pineapple accord. And it's this pineapple accord opens up Aventus that's very famous, right? You spray it, it's like this pineapple accord. And so the pineapple accord is somewhat sweet, but it's also juicy, which is slightly different from sweet. Okay, there's many different kinds of fresh. There's fresh sweet, there's fresh juicy, there's fresh tropical, which is what Aventus opens up with. So we have the sweet orange at 2%, lime at 1%, clary sage. Again, this is kind of that tea note, which very often can be used to bridge between citrus materials and woody materials. It's a tea note. And then we have the famous pineapple accord, which is at 0.5%. Because why? Why is it so small? Because there's a variety of pineapple accords which you can purchase, and many of them are quite strong, because the central material to most pineapple accords is a material that's called allyamyl acetate or glycolate, allyamyl acetate. And it's very powerful, and therefore most pineapple accords, you only need a little touch to have quite a large influence over the perfume. Aventus, the next material down, this is a very powdery, soft. It just creates a nice soft texture through the entire perfume. In that way, it acts somewhat like an ionone, but it's a bit more earthy. Linole, it works wonderfully with Patchouli or Patchouli, especially. And then finally, we have a little bit of vanillin, guys. Touch of sweetness. In most of my perfumes, I like to add a tiny little bit of vanilla at the end of the perfume. I find if I add vanilla in the beginning of a perfume, it can kind of get in the way of me perceiving other elements within that perfume. So just as a personal preference, I tend to add vanilla at the end of my formulas. And then finally, a little touch of birch tar absolute. This will, again, this is the dry down. At the very end of this perfume, what you will smell is the ambroxan and the birch tar, and you will smell the patchouli, the patchouli actually, and basically those kinds of, and the timber silk. So the end of this perfume, the longest lasting materials are all those woods, and then a touch of smoky birch tar. That is a natural material, very powerful. It's nearly banned by IFRA, but if you use a little bit, I think it's basically okay. So guys, this was a very quick analysis of a formula very similar. Well, this one as it is, rather similar to Creed's Aventus. Again, this is not the exact formula. And this is the sort of thing that perfumers do to study perfumes. We make perfumes, we replicate, we deconstruct formulas. We study them and the various accords in them. Please take your time, look at each and every single one of these materials, smell them closely, pause the video, watch it several times, and really think about how everything comes together. This is a very light lesson. I try to keep it less than an hour because I want to upload it to my Instagram if I can. So please enjoy. Have a wonderful day. And I'll post up a couple other more perfume lessons in the near future. Talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.